station. Always trust your gut.
Hello, my name is Chrissy Champagne, and you are listening to Residue, a true crime podcast dedicated to keeping you paranoid. You are listening to episode 57, A Christmas Slaying. As always, listener discretion is advised.
This has impacted us to the point that you know this can happen. You read about it in the papers. You know, I'm sure every one of you think, this is something that I hear about, but never imagine it's really going to hit your family. And when it does, you know there's bad people out there.
It is December 25th, 2003, a peaceful, wonderful, quiet Christmas for Bob and Idella Young. Earlier that Christmas day, Bob and Idella would call their daughter Kathy, talk to her and the grandkids on the phone for a little bit, and just let them know that they were thankful to have a nice, quiet, peaceful night home together alone for this Christmas. Bob wasn't feeling too well, so the children understood and they wished their parents a Merry Christmas. And that would be the last time they would ever speak to Bob and Idella Young. Idella Arlene Young and Robert Craig Young were married at Kern Park Christian Church in Portland, Oregon on August 31st, 1961. Between the two of them, they had 6 children. Bob had 4 and Idella had 2. Bob Young was born July 23rd, 1921 in Los Alamos, Colorado. Bob retired from the Air Force Reserve as a mechanic in the late 1950s. Idella Arlene Beamer Young was born March 14, 1930 in Eugene, Oregon. Her parents were Glenn and Mary Louise Beamer, and her family owned a thriving farm. It was called Beamer's Turkey Farm, and they raised turkeys for the troops during World War II. Idella attended Oregon State College until she married Larry Gillett. She had been active in the PTA and the Lions Club. Idella would soon divorce Larry Gillett. She would meet Bob, and the two would go on to own and operate a store that they called B&I Appliances, and this was in Lake Oswego. The couple won several awards for their business, and even though they were doing really well, to the point they even won a trip to the Bahamas because of how great their business was doing, they did end up selling their store in the late 1970s. This is when they moved to Nampa, Idaho, to be closer to Bob's mother and his sisters. They brought one granddaughter with them and raised her until she was able to live on her own. They both had their real estate license, and they opened a company called Young Realty. This is the second marriage for both Bob and Idella. They're blending their family together. They're starting their own business. Everyone says that this couple was amazing. They gave back to their community like no one else. Their daughter Kathy would say that my parents didn't get into real estate to become rich. They got into real estate to make a difference, to help change people's lives, to help people that were less fortunate. Bob and Idella were devoted to their church, to their community, to their family. Their hearts were so big. They were a mom and a dad, a grandma and a grandpa, and a friend to anyone who needed them. They touched the lives of hundreds of people. On December 29th, 2003, just after 11 a.m. in the morning, a man will come in to the Nampa police station to say that he found 2 bodies in a house. Now, this is going to be kind of concerning to the police on duty that day because this man is acting calm but concerned, and they're like, "What do you mean you found 2 bodies in a random house?" This man was someone that Bob and Idella worked with at the real estate office. on this morning of December 29th, this coworker was supposed to be helping Bob and Idella with the closing of a home that they were purchasing. They purchased a lot of rental properties, and they had many tenants in each of these properties. So their coworker's coming over to help them, but they're not answering their phone. They're not answering their door. He gets to the house. He opens their front door, and he notices that the entire place is just ransacked. He doesn't proceed any further. He instead calls the real estate office and tells them that something's up with Bob and Idella. He doesn't call the police. He just calls his company. So someone else from this real estate office goes to the police station. The second coworker goes to the police station to let them know that he also went to Bob and Idella's house, noticed the huge mess, noticed 2 bodies inside of the house, but he didn't proceed any further. He tried to call the police from their house phone, their landline, but the phone was dead. It was cut off. So he got in his car. He is now at the police station. He wants them to go and check on his coworkers and friends, Bob and Idella Young. Police rush over there. They are there within the hour because they don't know if these people are still alive, because all they know from this coworker is, I saw bodies. So they're thinking, let's get there as fast as we can. Maybe we can save them. But they know the moment they walk into this house that they are now dealing with a homicide. This case is going to be assigned to detectives Joe Martinez and Blake Slater. They say the moment they walk into the house, you can see Idella face down on the kitchen floor. The Christmas tree is tipped over on the floor, and next to it is Bob. He has couch cushions on top of him and a blanket covering his face. The homicide detectives would say that the creepiest aspect was that both Bob and Idella were tied up with Christmas lights. It appeared that Bob died from a stab wound to his back, but there were also these really mysterious and eerie wounds on Bob's cheek. It almost looked like poke marks in his face, like a utensil was used to poke into his cheek. So at this point, police are thinking, there's no way this was just a random robbery gone wrong, because this sort of looks like a torture killing. They also say that although Bob was covered in blankets and a pillow over his face and he was entirely clothed, that Idella was completely naked with a knife wound to her back. So detectives are wondering, was this a sexually motivated murder? Could this be a crime of passion? Bob was 82 years old and Idella was 73. Who would do this to an elderly couple on Christmas Day? The first lead that detectives get is they find a pair of keys stuck in the front door, like someone was using the keys to open the lock, but then just left them there. So they're going around the house with this set of keys. They're trying every key. This is a ring of many keys. They're trying every key in every doorway, in every lock, in the cars. These are not the Young's keys. So obviously, first thought is these keys must belong to our suspect. But there are going to be so many potential suspects because the Youngs loved everyone. The Youngs were around so many people on the daily, not only in their office, in their church, in their community, their tenants. They were always helping people who were in need of help. So there were going to be hundreds of people that the police are now going to have to interview. While still inspecting the crime scene, detectives are going to come upon a glove. And this glove would have blood on it. So they take that glove, they're going to have it sent to the labs to test for DNA. And while waiting for results, they're going to now start digging into the Young's past, digging into their coworkers, their friends, their family. They find out that the coworker that first went to the house that day, that morning, was named Chris. And now Chris was the one that showed up to the house, looked inside, but then only called the office, didn't call the police, didn't warn anyone else. So they're going to dig into Chris now, and they ask him to come in for an interview. They are going to notice that when Chris is speaking to them, he has some blood on his pants. They want to know what this blood is from, and he tells them that this blood is from a cut on his finger because he was working on house projects that weekend and he cut his hand. So the blood must have gotten onto his pants. Obviously, police do not believe him. This sounds suspicious. So they ask if he can take his pants off and let them have his pants. They're going to now take those pants into the labs and also have those pants processed for DNA and see if it matches up to that white cotton glove and the blood found on that. I mean, right now at this point, Chris is looking like a pretty good suspect. He didn't do anything to really help except call his job. Dude's got blood on his pants. Things are looking like they might be pointing to this coworker, but why would he do it? So the first suspect they have is this coworker named Chris. They're also going to have to start talking to the family because everyone knows you gotta just rule everyone out, every suspect. But as their daughter Kathy said, their family did not care that they had to be interviewed. They just wanted this to be done. They wanted to find out who did this to their parents. They were willing to do anything that detectives asked. Family's being interviewed, and now we're on to canvassing the neighborhood. They think that if they canvass the neighborhood, maybe they could find the owner of these keys. A couple of the neighbors had access to the Young's house, so maybe these keys belonged to a neighbor who lived close by. During canvassing, they come upon a man named Ralph Archer. Ralph Archer was the owner of these keys that were found in the Young's door. He said that he had access to their home. He would help them out often. They were a little older, so he would often help out, and they were helping him out because Ralph Archer was about to go on vacation for a couple days, so he wanted to leave his keys with the Youngs in case anything happened so they could keep an eye on his house, keep an eye on his car, and that's why he went there that evening to drop off the keys. But when he dropped off the keys, this was Christmas night, he said no one answered the door. He kept knocking and no one would answer. He was calling out their names, and so he didn't know what else to do. He just left the keys inside of the door, which is kind of strange, but it still doesn't mean he was possibly the killer. It's just a strange thing to do, like maybe leave them in the mailbox or try calling again later. But again, he has no motive. He left the keys there. He says, yes, I will submit my DNA. I will take a lie detector test. I will do whatever you need me to do. So now they submit the DNA of Ralph Archer, this coworker Chris, and now they're just going to wait for the results to come back. While waiting for DNA results, the autopsy will come back proving that Idella was sexually assaulted. There was a minor bruise in her vaginal area. Both Bob and Idella were killed by a single stab wound to the back by the ribs, almost the same exact place. This indicated that the suspect knew his way around a knife. One of the leading homicide detectives said, this person had to know how to cause pain and how to cause damage. He was familiar with how to kill. This is when one of the lead detectives gets a brilliant idea. Nampa was home to at least 3 slaughterhouses. So this person could be working at one of these slaughterhouses since these cuts were so precise. Detectives go to all 3 slaughterhouses right away, and the first thing they find out is that these slaughterhouses used those same white cotton gloves that they found in the Young's home. So at this point now, they're going to interview every single employee or anyone in that building who had or could have had any kind of affiliation with Bob and Idella. There are going to be 430 names on this list of suspects, and these detectives are going to go through every single one of these people. It seems like a pretty big list. You're probably going to find someone on that list that can tell you something, but no. The slaughterhouse concept that one of the employees had to have been the killer is going to be a dead end. It is now around this time, early February 2004, DNA results are going to come back. The blood on the glove and the sweat found on Idella's body were not Bob and Idella, so now they have a separate DNA. Detectives test this DNA against the DNA that Chris, the coworker, gave, and it is not a match. Chris, the coworker, is ruled out. They next test the DNA on the next door neighbor, Ralph, and Ralph is not a match. Ralph is now ruled out. So now we are back to square one. Detectives have nothing. The Young's daughter, Kathy, is starting to get really depressed that this case is going to turn cold soon. So she's not going to let that happen. She's going to do a ton of interviews, keep herself in the media, keep the case in the eyes of the community. The community is even going to raise a $10,000 reward, and they're going to get Crime Stoppers involved. So many tips are coming in to Crime Stoppers. It's months and months of tip after tip. Police are following up on every single tip. That Nampa Police Department did not give up on this case. They did not let any tips slide. They were going to solve this crime. Detectives even went to the jailhouse and asked every single inmate, every single person in that jailhouse, if they had any info on the Young homicide case. Like maybe somebody in one of their cells was talking, saying that they committed the crime. Have you guys heard anything? But no leads would come from this either. An entire year is going to go by. We are now full circle back to December 24th. It is now 2004, and we have no leads a year later. Their daughter says she did not celebrate Christmas. She wants nothing to do with Christmas. She just wants to find out who killed her parents. It wasn't going to be until March of 2005 that detectives were going to get another break in this case. A prisoner in a Washington state prison has been bragging about his crime. This subject was stating that he killed the Youngs, and police look into it and find out that this possible suspect was actually in the town of Nampa during the time that the Youngs were killed. So police go to Washington. They conduct an interview. This inmate says he didn't do it. He will not admit that he did it. He said he was just kind of bragging to his friends in the jailhouse because he just wanted to seem cool. He even says, you know what, I'll take a DNA test. Just swab my cheek. And police do. Results come back. This inmate is also no match to the DNA found at the crime scene. 4 years are going to go by. This case is still unsolved, but investigators are not giving up. They come up with the idea to just start from the beginning. Let's look at this with fresh eyes. Let's make flowcharts, notes, reports, go over people of interest. What did we miss? So they take out all of these notebooks from the first set of tips from Crime Stoppers. There are thousands of tips. Several calls were coming from this one individual. It was just this one guy that they kind of overlooked because he wasn't given any tips. He was just asking every time he called, so what's up with the Young case? Can you tell me what's going on with the Young case? Are they closer to solving this thing? And this guy just kind of slipped under the radar at the time. But now, with a fresh eyes approach and looking over everything, detectives are like, maybe we should check in on this guy, because this is kind of weird. So they bring this little tipster in for questioning, and the police are asking him, do you know the Youngs? Are you a close friend? Why are you so interested in their case? And this guy is telling them, no, I don't know them at all. The tipster says that he was hanging out with a friend one night, and the friend said to him simply these words, I done it. The tipster says that he and the friend were drinking, camping. They were driving home drunk one night, and his friend named Pete Roberts decided to just blurt out the words, I done it. And then goes on to tell his friend that he was the one that killed the Youngs. Police are like, who the hell is Pete Roberts? This guy's name was never on a suspect list. He was never on a slaughterhouse list or a community list or renters, nothing. They didn't know who this guy was. So they get Pete's phone number from his friend, they call him, and they ask him to come down to the station to talk. He is never told why he's coming in to talk, and he never asks why he is coming in to talk. He just shows up. And when he shows up, it's just him and one detective in an interrogation room. The detective tells him, I'm here to talk to you about the Young homicide case. And this man, Pete Roberts, says, I don't know what you're talking about. I don't know about the Young homicide case. I don't even know who those people are. This strikes the detective as sort of odd because every single person in town in Nampa knew this story. This is a small community and this was a big deal. 2 elderly people were murdered on Christmas. You know who the Youngs are. This Pete guy finally ends up admitting he knows who the Youngs are because he used to rent an apartment from them. So the detective knows this guy's a liar. He's already messed up in this conversation. So the detective starts to get a little tricky with his questioning. He knows that Pete is divorced. So he asks him, were you divorced from your wife before the homicide, before the murder? And Pete answers that, yeah, we actually got divorced before the Youngs were murdered. So the detective's like, how do you know if you got divorced before the Youngs were murdered? You just told me you didn't even know they were murdered. You knew nothing about the murder. I haven't given you a date as to when this happened. So clearly, okay, they have now caught Pete in a lie and they ask him to submit his DNA. They do a little swab. He gives it to them, but then he says, I am done talking to you. We will have no more questions. So they have to let him go. And now they just have to wait for Pete Roberts' DNA to come back. But while they're waiting, Pete's about to be fucked because they're going to go talk to his ex-wife. What does his ex-wife know? Well, Pete's ex-wife tells them that she was renting from the Youngs. She says that her and Pete had a lot of issues. Their marriage was falling apart. He was abusive. She didn't want to be with him anymore. So Bob and Idella Young, they helped her out financially so that she could get a divorce. And Pete ended up believing that since this couple was helping him out, that obviously that meant that Bob Young must have been having an affair with Pete's ex-wife. Pete's ex-wife is going to tell detectives that Pete hated Bob, hated him, despised him, wanted revenge on Bob and Idella because they were the reason that his family broke up because they provided the money for his ex-wife to get a divorce. Detectives find out next that, guess what? Pete did work at that slaughterhouse as a meat cutter. But he was fired prior to the homicide, so when detectives went in to interview, Pete's name wasn't on any list. But that is crazy insane that one of those detectives had that idea that this had to be one of the butchers down at one of the local slaughterhouses. So now we have the ex-wife really giving it all to us, telling us what kind of person this asshole is. We also have the fact that this piece of shit was a meat cutter down at a slaughterhouse. And now we're going to get the gift of the DNA results being a 100% perfect match to Pete Roberts. Now we got warrant, arrest, boom, bang, brought into an interview room. Detectives have Pete all to themselves now, and they want to hear what he has got to say. He says, and I quote, "Kids and old people are very special in my heart." And then he goes on to say he would never do this. You gotta believe me. I love kids and old people. What are you kidding me? Look at me. Detectives whip out pictures of the cotton gloves with blood on them right at the crime scene, and they start asking him, are these the kind of gloves you wear when you used to work at the slaughterhouse? And he's like, those the cotton gloves, they look the same. His interrogation at this point, you can start seeing in his face in the video interrogation that he's starting to catch on that he's not going to make it out of this one. Pete is now going to start to talk. now we have a clearer picture about what happened on the night of December 25th, 2003. Pete says he decided to go to their house on Christmas night. He went up to their door, knocked on the door. Bob answered and invited him in. He says that he sat down in the living room talking with Bob and Idella. He then says, "I guess that was on my mind then, is to harm them." Pete will tell detectives, "I woke up that morning crazy insane. I don't know who I was or what I was doing. I remember knocking on their door, and I remember Bob came to the door and we went in." Idella went to the bathroom, and this is when Pete decided to attack Bob. He stated, "I remember putting him on the ground and tying him up with Christmas lights. Idella came back to see what the commotion was, and I also tied her up." Pete stated that he hated Bob so much that he poked him in the face with a barbecue fork as a type of torture technique. He then tells detectives that he took Idella's clothes off and he raped her in front of Bob. He says, "I kneeled over him, put my knees on his back, and I stabbed him. That is what I remember seeing myself doing. It was a revenge thing. You hurt me, you hurt my family." In November of 2008, Pete Roberts would plead guilty to 2 counts of first-degree murder. He would be sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The family members of Bob and Idella Young were able to tour the prison where Pete Roberts would spend the rest of his life, and the family would say that they were glad to see that his life would be very limited. Daughter Kathy Young Loggins told the Idaho Press, "To know that this monster will be behind bars for the rest of his natural life, personally, I wanted life in prison. Death would have been the easy way out." The Youngs' daughter and granddaughter were able to speak at the sentencing. They said that what happened to their parents and grandparents was disgusting, devastating, and that it will be something they will never forget. The judge said it very well. He said that our family will have closure to this piece of it, but we will never have complete closure. Every day we will wake up and know what happened, and nothing can take that away, said their daughter, Kathy Young Loggins. During sentencing, Pete Roberts was also given the chance to apologize to the victims' family members. He said, "I just want to say I lost control. I lost control of my mind. I hope both families can find closure and peace in all this. I am truly and deeply sorry about all of it." I don't think monsters feel sorry for anything. The Young's daughter, Kathy, stated that her parents were so giving. They went above and beyond all the time for everyone. She said this was almost to a fault. We are now in the season of giving. It's that time of year when people focus on generosity, supporting those in need. The holidays bring out the giver in all of us, and they are a time for giving love, thanks, and showing appreciation for those you love. But after hearing a story like this, I just want to remind you, sometimes the light opens the door to darkness. Stay paranoid. Thank you so much for listening to this week's episode of Residue. I appreciate you all so very much. Residue is created, hosted, edited, researched, and produced by Chrissy Champagne. That's me. If you enjoyed Residue, please consider following me on Instagram at Residue Podcast, Facebook at Residue, a true crime podcast, or TikTok at Residue Podcast. Most importantly, do not forget to hit that follow button at the top of the screen on any of your favorite podcast platforms. That way, you'll be able to meet me back here next Tuesday for another episode of Residue. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you have a safe and happy holiday season, and I hope you remember to stay safe and